All right, guys. Thank you for joining me again. Yet another episode of Friend Fridays, and it's a pleasure to have a good friend of mine, Joe Clifford. He's an author. He wrote a book called Junkie Love that I had read several years before I had reached out to him. And after I published my novel, Wasting Talent, I needed a blurb. A blurb is one of those quotes on the back of the book where basically someone's sucking your dick and being like, this guy's so talented. That's what a blurb is. And I asked him to do it. And, it's always kind of awkward in the beginning when you're starting your writing career and you have to ask somebody that's better at writing than you to give you an endorsement for your work. But he was very generous, and he wrote, he wrote back some encouraging complimentary emails. And then throughout the early stages of my career, he was definitely one of my biggest supporters, inviting me to literary events. And he certainly had my back. He has an interesting story himself, and his first book, well, I guess it was his second book, but his first kind of big hit book was called Junkie Love, and I consider it a memoir. In the beginning of the book, he says he doesn't really know what to call it, but that's how I interpreted the book. He was a drug addict for a very long time. He was homeless in San Francisco for about a decade. And then he went and he got his master's in creative writing in Florida, and very inspirational story. It certainly inspired me when I read the book. And then I was happy when he started having my back in the literary world. So basically, we were talking before this, the video, kind of off the record. And he's like, "Hey," I was like, "What should we talk about?" He's like, "No one gives a fuck about books. Let's talk about drugs." And I was like, "All right, cool." So, and I've never really had that conversation with him. So without further ado, this is Joe Clifford.
Thanks for having me. I didn't get your message for a blurb for about 6 months. I think you thought I was blowing you off because you sent me a message on Twitter, which I'm older and I don't understand the Twitter. It confuses me. And so it moves too fast. So I didn't see the message for a long time. And then, yeah, I mean, there's two kinds of blurbs I write. There's kind of blurbs I write because I feel obligated to write a blurb. And I read a blurb and something like, a blend of this and a blend of that, a tour de force. And you do it because, this is how the industry works. I need blurbs, people blurb me. Nobody ever actually reads the whole book. Your book, I actually read the whole book. And it's not blowing smoke up your ass because you have me on the show. It was one of the best drug books I've ever read. And I've said throughout all your ups and downs, your troubles, no matter what happens, the one thing that cannot be denied is that you are a phenomenally talented writer.
Well, thank you very much, Joe. I certainly appreciate that. And it means a lot coming from you because I was a fan of your work long before I had the pleasure of actually meeting you in person. Um, people know a lot about my history, that are on my YouTube channel because I talk about it pretty explicitly. But how did it start for you? When did the addiction stuff first begin?
I, yeah, I mean, I was a good Catholic, born again Christian, fucking right wing douchebag. Go back in Connecticut, growing up, and I didn't touch anything until I was 21. I think it was like a month before my 21st birthday. It was the first time I had touched alcohol. And by the end of my 22nd birthday, I was addicted to heroin and meth and living in San Francisco. So I went from 0 to 60 pretty fast. Um, I mean, I think that's why temperance works. It's why having kids of my own, when I'm going to have to navigate that minefield, I just don't think forbidding or prohibiting or making something taboo. So, my mom's mom was an alcoholic. My dad's mom was an alcoholic, and understandably, they were really anti-alcohol. But I also think that part of a rite of passage of being a teenager is sneaking out and getting a beer with your friends, and that's sort of how most people do it. I'm also wired. Addicts are wired a certain way, and I'm very. I don't use the term addictive personality. I had a professor, D.D. Stout, when I was before the writing took off, I was going to be a drug and alcohol counselor. And she beat it into me that there is no such thing as an addictive personality. And there's a whole bunch of reasons, but we won't get into that. But it just is a term that gets thrown around because it's easy. Well, they got an addictive personality. Not really. We have things inside us that aren't right and they're not working. In my case, I grew up in an abusive household. My father was, to quote the Dropkick Murphys, belligerent and distant, also extremely violent. When it came time for me to make my way in the world, I was headstrong, I was stubborn, I was going to do things exactly my way. I didn't take well to authority. I didn't take well to being told what to do. I certainly couldn't work a fucking job. And all those things conspired, and I also played a rock and roll band. So all those things, once I touched speed for the first time, that was it. And then I felt normal. I was like, this must be what it feels like to be a normal person, not besieged by self-doubt and suicidal thoughts and this just weird things that kind of really go along with being an artist. That's sort of the problem. I mean, you don't meet many well-adjusted artists. I'm sad to say. I mean, I'm sure they're out there. James Patterson seems like a nice guy. He probably is well-adjusted. But most writers you meet are fucked up. I think that's part of what allows us to do what we do, is that we have a defect that would allow us to assimilate into culture, modern society. And because of that defect, a super sensitivity, an empathy, whatever you want to call it, however spiritual you want to get, I live in the Bay Area, so I'm careful not to use too hippy-dippy terms, but whatever that is, it lets us write. And the price we pay is part of our sanity.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's insane that you said that about empathy. I was just thinking the other day, and I know that I'm one of those people that just hasn't seemed to get it. I'll get little bouts of sobriety. When I first met you, I'd just thrown 3 years down the tube. I think maybe a week before I'd met you. So you've never really gotten a chance to meet sober Ryan. I found that over the years through addiction, you get more and more desensitized and you lose that sense of empathy. But when it comes back strong. And I was just talking last night about how being altruistic and, kind of paying your karmic debt by doing nice charitable things for other people. I donate what I can to causes and it makes me feel better. And it makes me more empathetic. And just the other day, and I haven't talked about this on my channel, but just the other day, I thought I had lost like the ability to really be empathetic towards other people. And as a writer, I think we are overly empathetic. So I thought maybe I'd lost that social antenna at some point, just from being desensitized from addiction. The other day, I was looking through someone's Facebook, someone I didn't even know. I was just kind of like looking through their timeline. And I saw that their nephew, about the same age as Nico, had died. And they had a picture of him, with tubes, he was in the hospital, had tubes all over him. And I started crying. This is for someone I don't know at all. And it was kind of bittersweet to have the empathy back, because I know when I have that empathy, I can be hyper focused and I can write and articulate it. But, at the same time, it made me very sad. And then we're very depressed. Would you say that because you're a writer and because you have a hyper awareness and you're probably overly empathetic, do you think that that's created a lifetime of depression and subsequent addiction? That's what you said. How do you deal with it?
Did you ever see the movie Bedazzled with the remake with Elizabeth Hurley and Brendan Fraser?
No.
You should see it for two reasons. One reason because Elizabeth Hurley is fucking insanely sexy as the devil, and she's just fucking gorgeous, and it's just, God, it's just gorgeous. But there's a scene in there where the guy wishes that he could be, he's trying to get with this girl, and she says, I want some man who's sensitive. So he gets to wish from the devil she can be sensitive. So he's sensitive at all the time. He sees the sunrise, he's crying. He's like, you see the wind's blowing, it's beautiful. Like, so I mean, the point is like, the world we live in, and what a shit show it is. You see those pictures and it's great that you can't cry. The truth is that when you pass over those pictures and it doesn't affect you, I don't think that makes you any less of a person, because all we see around this world is pain and suffering. If you had that if you were open to that constantly, you'd never get anything done. It's I pass bums on the street. These are the same bums. I used to be one of these people. And sometimes I give money and sometimes I just shut down and like, not today, because I can't save the world. You can't save the world. As to whether it led to more addiction, I mean, addicts are selfish. We're selfish people. And we have very good reason to be selfish because we're hurting. I mean, it's as simple as, drugs fix a problem. If drugs didn't work, there wouldn't be 1,000,001 addicts, right? Like, drugs fucking work. That's why we take them. They do what they come as advertised. Heroin kills your pain. Speed gives you some energy. Coke gives you energy for about 20 minutes. But these things work. And if they didn't work, why would you take them? This I always hate it. I go to rehab where, or you just say no stuff, right? Where you just like, how drugs are bad. And the first time you shoot heroin, you're going to be in an alleyway sucking somebody's dick. It doesn't happen quite that fast, right? First time you shoot a drug, and I'll tell you, out of all the drugs I've shot, heroin was the one where I was like, that's it? The first time I did heroin, I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, this was supposed to be the big drug, and the change is so minor, but what heroin does is it removes all physical, spiritual, and emotional pain, which we are all in all the time. But you don't realize it. It's an insidious sort of emotional baggage that's just weighing on you. And when you take the opiates, as Hunter Thompson once said, I know you're friends with Johnny Depp, and you just got Hunter Thompson's smoking pipe. But his line I love is, there's nothing romantic about the opiates. Like all the other drugs, Hunter loved, but the opiates, because the opiates get into you and they attach to you, and what makes them so hard to quit is you can give up the fast times, you can give up the party, you give up the creative, but asking for that pain to return and to take that pain on. And all we're doing when you're doing heroin, especially drugs, but in particular heroin, is you're stopping a clock. You're stopping your development. You're stopping your emotional maturity. You're stopping the pain. So when you quit heroin, however long you pay back. It's like taking a loan from a bank. So you got to pay it back. There is no price break. Like if you use heroin for 10 years, you've got to pay back 10 years. They don't give you fucking like 8 years and 6 months for good behavior. You pay back the 10 years. I fucked up for 10 years. It was 10 years, almost to the day when my life, I quit basically at 30, right? Started at 20, quit basically at 30. We're just rounding off for easy number. When I turned 40, I got money, I got married, I got kids, I got a house, I got my books published. Like everything took off 10 years to the day. It was almost like the universe. I believe in God, but a different God than a Christian God, because I fucking don't like those people. Even though I grew up, I believe in God. Point is, you call it whatever you want to call it. Universe, karma, higher thing that we cannot comprehend, whatever it is. It was almost as, okay, your debt's been paid. Here's your shit back. Here you go. But you pay the time. There is no parole with addiction. You pay back the time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the first time I shot heroin, I sucked a dick about 10 minutes later. But
I know you said not to do this. You said not to do this. But like, this is a great fucking cartoon. I'll send it to you later. It's called The Most Badass Guy I Ever Met. And in the first panel, there's two guys. One guy goes, see that guy over there at the bar? Yeah, that's the most badass guy I know. Yeah, he once sucked dick for bus fare, and then he walked. It's like two panels later, it just shows the guy looking over, like, I'll send you the cartoon. I fucking love it.
Oh, yeah, and when I wrote Wasting Talent, I believe that you wrote Junkie Love in the same, it's kind of retrospective. Like you were sober when you wrote that, correct?
I started writing that book while I was still using, but I turned it into a book that's palatable and readable when I was off the shit. Yeah.
So you wrote high and edited sober, like Hemingway says?
Pretty much. I wrote the bulk of it in a long-term rehab. I was in a long-term rehab in the north end of Hartford, basically a 6-month program, and I started writing it then. And the cool thing I thought, and probably what separates this book from my other books, which, like I was telling you before, I have a dozen books published, but Junkie Love is the one people, really seem to care about, is that it was such a raw, emotional, everything, the wounds were fresh, but there was also the perception of time. When you're coming back from, call it the vortex, the abyss, the whatever you want to call it, where you're in another world when you're on drugs. You're not here. You're somewhere else. And when you're coming back, you're in this sort of, this liminal space, this sort of, purgatory. You're between worlds. You're not in the past. You're not in the future. So everything was happening at once. I would remember, my first time using. I remember my last time using. I remember this girlfriend. I remember going to my dealer Bluehead's house. But it all seemed to happen at the same time. So when I was writing the story, I told the story like that, almost like it was time travel. So it's nonlinear, which is, I don't recommend writing a nonlinear book, but that's the way that story had to be told, because that's how addiction. I want to mirror what addiction's really like, and I didn't want to write one of these, even though I have been paid to go to my old high school to talk about the dangers of drugs, which was a tricky one because. I have to go up there, and high school kids can sniff out bullshit, right? So I'm on stage and I'm telling kids, like, here I am, like, being brought back and flown back, paid some good money to speak to them about why drugs are bad. And I'm sure the kids are in the audience, like, well, if they're so fucking bad, why are you up here with all these public folks? Like, you got money now and shit. Mm-hmm. So, they can sniff that stuff out. But I did want to tell the story of what addiction was really like. And I didn't want to be one of those guys to go to the high schools. It's like, I did drugs and they're bad, don't do drugs. Because, like, they sniffed that out. I asked her. I mean, drugs, a lot of times, a lot of my time on drugs was fun. I had good times. It wasn't all miserable. If the first time you did drugs, it was miserable, you're not going to keep doing them. It was fun for a while. It was fun for a few years. For a few years, it was a good time. And I made a lot of good friends out there. My best friend, Tom Pitts, I met using. Where it gets tricky is after a while, you recognize it's time to stop and move on, and you can't, because now it's got its claws and it's such a part of you. And now when you're thinking, I should stop, you got that other part of you telling you not to stop, but you don't know which part of you is telling you which part. You, in a sense, you almost become schizophrenic. You hear voices, and you don't know whose voice is telling you what, to do what. Early on, I would get a voice saying, you should walk down the street and prove you're strong enough. That wasn't really me. That was the other me saying, walk down the street because I know you're not strong enough, and that fucking guy's going to fucking offer you drugs, and you're going to take them. And so and that's what makes getting off heroin so tough. I think you need the time. I kept going to these 28-day programs. One time I went to the 6-month program where my mind could reset. But during that process of resetting is when I started writing Junkie Love. So I had this huge mess. The original draft of that was completely incomprehensible. It involved time travel. It involved little monkeys the size of mice sleeping in walnut shells. It was completely batshit insane. But when I started going around reading excerpts from it, I'd read the excerpts about the actual drugs. The time we got raided by the SFPD and the feds over at Hepatitis Heights. The time, we thought the DEA was following us. And I'm like, the DEA is not following us. You're on coke. And the DEA was really following us. Those kind of stories I would tell. And at the heart of Junkie Love, Junkie Love is my first wife, Hadley, and my girlfriend, Becky, which I had both sort of at the same time, although not really at the same time, because when you're an addict, you're sort of, all over the place. But yeah, at the heart of it, it's a love story, and it's really about a boy trying to finding a home. It's building his room on. It's a coming of age story. Most coming of age stories don't involve getting the shit kicked out of you in a liquor store with a 50-cent can of soda because you had walking pneumonia and you needed something to drink. But that's my coming of age story.
And that's probably why it resonates with people still. I mean, how old is that book now? 10 years?
God, I started writing it. I literally started writing that book in 2001. And only one line from that original draft remains. All the ordinary people with all their ordinary concerns. That's the only line that made it to the final copy. But it took me years to write it. Then I did a school and learn how to write. Because I had all this episodic stuff in part to mirror drug addiction, but also because I didn't know how to fucking tell a story. I didn't know causality. I didn't know this and this caused this. So when I learned craft and I learned, people like Lynn Barrett and Les Standiford and James W. Hall and John Dufresne, the people when I was an undergrad, Tom Bazooka and Steve Ostrowski and Dave Capel, all these writers who taught me, craft, the late Barry Leeds. I took that education and then went back and applied it to the original manuscript. So basically I had all this just a mess. So I kind of had to sift the wheat through the for the chaff and all that, and pull it out, and then get a narrative, which I connected with. I'm doing it. Hey, buddy, what's up? I'm doing an interview. Remember, I said not to. You want to come? Come on. This is Jack. This is Jack Kerouac. Jackson Kerouac.
Hey, Jack. Hi, Jack. You remember me? I probably saw you when you were what? One, right? 1 or 2? How old are you? Is it 5? 5. Wow. You're in kindergarten now?
No, still in preschool. Now I'm coming to academy.
He's going to the academy where his brother
Next
goes.
year.
Next year.
Next year you start kindergarten.
Mankind does not get wiped off the face of the earth. He will be going to kindergarten next year. Yeah.
So
finish his interview.
5.
Okay.
Met you in 60. So yeah, he was 1 when I met him.
Little guy.
1.
Right.
Hey, Jack.
He's going to use a lot of bad words, so go upstairs.
Is it his name's Jack Kerouac.
Jackson Kerouac, yeah.
Jackson Kerouac. My son's name is Nico Gatsby, and your other son's name is Holden Codfield.
It's Holden Clifford, and Holden James. I really should have held out for Caulfield because I think I could have gotten it. But early on, I was so excited. My wife just I'm not supposed to say her name because she's a public figure. I don't know how this fucking works, but yeah, she agreed to Holden. I was so surprised. For the longest time, I wanted to name my kid Pink, from Pink Floyd, and then I had, I thought the names heroin and amphetamine would make nice names for kids. I thankfully grew out of that phase. And then, settled on the literary thing. He keeps opening the door. He's going, and I can't stop him.
It's okay. It's all
they're,
right. Maybe if he's around, we'll use less bad language, and then YouTube will actually monetize.
I don't use less bad language. I remember he was fucking 3. We were at like grandma's house. Like grandma's like 92. Like her family's like this big old, like kind of little aristocratic sort of family. He's at the table. And he's like, I want some fucking water. And the whole table just stops. And they all look and they're like, he didn't. And then they all look at me and I'm like, what the fuck are you looking at me for? And then again, they're looking at, what'd you say, Jack? I want some fucking water. So no, there's no getting around. That's the other thing I decided with kids. I wasn't gonna curb my language. I wasn't gonna curb who I was because that's where teen angst comes from, right? Teen angst comes from the realization that when you get to be a teenager, you realize that the people you love the most have been lying to you your whole life. It's not what's on the inside that matters most. Money buys happiness. All this fucking shit they tell us, right? No, like to tell you, like when you're a kid and you buy this, you buy into it, and you get older, and you're like, wait a second, you're a fucking hypocrite. It's the Beastie Boys, right? Like, that my old man's a hypocrite, smokes 2 packs a day. Like, so, what I'm getting at is you tell your kids the way you want the world to be. It's a good thing. You want the world to be like this. I tell my kids what the world is like. In fact, I had a huge fight with my wife last night about this, because we're going through now, and Jackson started crying because there's, cheese on his toast, and he didn't want cheese on his toast. And we got a big fight with my wife because she's coddling him, and she's a mom, and she's like, the world's fucking ending. Like, eat your fucking toast. Like, holding it, like, that's not going to make this stuff go away. So, but I'm also from the East Coast where it's a little more, a little more brusque back there. We're not quite as, and my wife's obviously a better person, so I come better halves. And I'm sure she's right.
We're more fatalistic out here in California.
I'm just scared that, in this world, where it seems like it's going, if I'm not around, I don't want my kids going around thinking, sharing is caring is true. It is, and I'm glad you do it in preschool. But when you get older, there's a quote I have my kids, they both can quote it verbatim. It's from Rocky Balboa. The world is not, I said, let me tell you something you already know. And they'll finish it. I calm down like you do now. The world's a very mean and nasty place. You, me, ain't nobody gonna hit as hard as life. But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done. So if you know what you're worth, go out and get what you're worth. But you got to be willing to take the hits. You can't be pointing fingers saying you ain't where you want to be because of him or her or anybody. Cowards do that, and that ain't you. You're better than that. And both those kids can quote that because I really fucking think that's true. Like that's this whole life.
That's verbatim from Rocky?
Yeah.
That's like really good prose. Sly wrote that?
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
His story is awesome. Like if you read, the backstory of Rocky, the original Rocky, like he had to sell his dog. That guy had nothing. He wrote the book. He wrote the screenplay to Rocky, and they came to him. I think they first offered him like $3,000 for the screenplay, then they got to $30,000. I know they got up to like $300,000, and he's living in like this one-room dump. Like he's got nothing. He had to sell his dog, but the deal was they wouldn't let him star in it. They wanted Ryan O'Neal or Burt Reynolds. Can you imagine how much that movie would have fucking sucked with Ryan O'Neal and Burt Reynolds?
Yeah.
Can you imagine the artistic integrity of something like Stallone starving? Like, I mean, I would have sold it at $3,000. Yeah, here, all right, take it, gone. You're gonna make a movie out of my thing? Great. But to hang on going like, no, I know my vision. I know I have to play the part. Nobody can play the part of Rocky like Stallone. So, yeah, it's a great story.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I had no idea that he was that good of a writer. When
He's also doing a lot of shit.
What year did you stop? Did the like hardcore addiction for you stop? I mean, at what point did you stop injecting crystal meth and heroin? When did that happen? Uh-oh. 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 All right. Wow. So we're still recording.
Okay, that's cool. There's a long gap there.
Well, maybe I need to step up my editing game anyway. So this might be the first video I actually edit. So, but what I was asking was, yeah, Wi-Fi has been my Wi-Fi sucks anyway. I mean, I steal it from my landlord, and it's just not very good. I need to cough up $60 a month, whatever it is. But what ultimately made you stop being a junkie? I mean, because if I understand right, like you'll still drink here and there, and whatever. I think you're on pain medication because you were in a bad motorcycle accident. But how did you stop? How do you stop with the actual junkie behavior, like the actual act of like slamming heroin in your neck? Like how did that come to a halt with you?
Yeah, well, a couple of things were happening. One, my mom was dying around 2000. I knew she didn't have a lot of time left, and I really wanted her to see me not like that because it was breaking her heart. The other thing was that I had a bunch of felonies. I mean, I was looking at time, and I was a lot smaller then. I mean, I weighed 225 pounds now, but back then I weighed 150. Like,
wow.
I wouldn't have lasted very long. I was a lot better looking when I was younger. So I was very pretty, very slight, almost dainty. And the prospect of going to prison scared the fuck out of me. So I fled. I had worn out from my arrest in California for this check scam, and I fled to LA, which was stupid, not realizing there was extra, interstate extradition. Then I went back to find another girl, and this is all, it's all on Junkie Love. It was a period of crazy days, but it ends with a suicide attempt, and my just going like, all right, it's time to clean up, and locking myself up for 6 months. Regarding the drinking and the pain meds, which I'm glad you brought up because I'm very open and upfront about this. I didn't do AA. I don't have anything against AA. I think they've helped a lot of people. That's wonderful, The first 5 years, I didn't do anything. I didn't touch anything. I was terrified. Because you hear the stories in AA. If you have one drink, you can be back out there. And I was terrified. And then after 5 years, I started to soften a little bit and realized, I could have a glass of wine and stop. Wasn't that big a deal. And a couple of years after that was when I had the bad motorcycle accident. I shattered my pelvis, 50 miles an hour on a highway. No helmet, shattered my pelvis, broke my back, legs, ribs, lung collapsed, broke. I almost lost my leg. And I almost had to cut it off. And it was bad. And they told me, you're going to need pain meds. I mean, first thing they did when they picked me up off the tarmac is one of the paramedics. I said, I'm like, I can't, I'm coughing up blood, literally coughing up blood. I'm like, I can't have pain meds. I'm a recovering addict. And I remember his look on his face and just went, you need morphine. And then Josh Moore, who's another amazing writer, talked about having to go in for surgery and recovery. He talks about being called a free lapse. But after that, stint in the hospital, and so I was in a wheelchair for a while. I was non-weight bearing. I couldn't walk. Your leg shrivels up. I was going to the gym on like crutches. It was just a nightmare. 6 months of like, apartments aren't meant for wheelchairs. I remember my brother, who passed away, but he came down he was still a junkie at that point, and he's helped me around the house, and I'm, in immense pain, and of course I'm not touching anything, and the day he leaves, I tried to get coffee on my own. My wheelchair wouldn't go into the kitchen. It wasn't big enough, like I couldn't get in there. It just weird shit like that. Anyway, fast forward a couple years later, they told me I need pain meds. I'm like, I'm not touching that stuff. Like I got off that shit. No way. And after a couple of years, degenerative arthritis. I got a hole in my spine. I need a cane most days. And it got to a point where I went to a doctor. I'm like, listen, here's my history. Here's what I'm up against. And we found a treatment plan that includes a very low dose of pain meds. It's not a high dose at all. In fact, my general doctor can prescribe it, but still, it is a pain med, and I'm always upfront about that. I do take one, and frankly, I can't really function without it. I'm sure a lot of it ties into the whole thing we're talking about. And in my weaker, more self-deprecating moments where I want to hate myself, I'll think, like, did I really fucking change anything? Like, how lucky am I that I had that accident 8 years after getting off the stuff? Because maybe I would have returned to heroin anyway. Because the stats for returning to heroin are super high. Maybe this little tiny dose, right? Maybe that's just enough to keep my receptors satisfied. I don't fucking know. I really don't know. All I know is that I stopped shooting the shit in my neck. My deal with the world was simple, right? I'll stop fucking being a scumbag junkie, stealing your fucking VCRs, and that's how long ago this was, because I was stealing VCRs. And I'll stop being a scum, and I'll start contributing and giving something back. And once I made that decision, the world has provided for me, and part of that was the accident, which obviously stone cold sober during the accident, but without that accident, I don't have this house. I got a settlement. Without that accident, I don't have my kids because my wife is out of my league, and I got some money, and so I got it. So who the fuck knows, man? I don't like to be full of shit. I really try to be genuine, and I don't like the sub platitudes. Like, I don't fucking know how it worked. I know I don't inject drugs into my neck anymore. I don't drink to excess. I don't drink daily. I don't abuse medications that I'm prescribed by a doctor. But I also don't think, because of my history, that I should be walking around in pain. Like, that just seemed kind of stupid. That was a trade-off, right? I was like, either I take the meds the doctors are offering, or I can be a martyr, like sleeping half the day. I'm not here to fucking pitch AA. Like, I'm not here to sell like clean and sober. If you can do drugs and make it work for your life, God bless you. I couldn't
do it.
I couldn't do it. I mean, I have nothing against them. I just couldn't. They were daily, injections of heroin, cocaine, and methamphetamine to my neck. Surprisingly, was getting in the way of the life I wanted to live. I was on the streets. I was eating out of dumpsters. I was eating food off the ground. I remember the day finding candy bars that had fallen, somebody had dropped under their car, and they were all melted, and just feeling like I just won the lottery, because it was like 4 of them. And I was going to stay a lot, like I don't fucking eat food off the ground. So, either I'm extremely lucky or unlucky, or somebody out there is looking out for me. And it's part of the reason I believe in God, because it's either I'm very lucky, or there's things we don't know, man. I don't know how this thing works. I have no idea how it works. I don't pretend to know how it works. I know 2 things. There's a God, and I'm not him or her. And I'll leave it at that with the religious stuff.
Yeah, so you're essentially agnostic then? Is that how you...
Carl Sagan, I was thinking about this the other day. Carl Sagan had a great quote. He's like, if there really are aliens, it's not going to look like us for the eyes and the gray skin. Like, it would be like trying to explain a peacock to somebody who's never seen a bird. And I think that the concept that we use the word God, but I think, whatever that thing, it's in a language we can't speak. It's in a color we don't see. It's in a dimension we haven't discovered yet. It's beyond. You can't take the limited scope of our understanding, which is very limited. I've only been around for a while, and then take this and try to be that presumptuous and hubristic to assume you have figured out who God is. Like it smacks. I mean, hubris is the only one that comes to mind. There's so much we don't know. So what you got, if you've got 1% of, if you got one piece of a 10 bazillion piece puzzle, if you use distorted. Now, if you've got 99 out of 100 pieces, sure, then you can get a pretty accurate picture. But we don't know that. And so, I mean, I just saw someone from my hometown with a God greater than coronavirus. My sister sent me, I was like, Jesus, like, what the fuck? I mean, if he's great, what the fuck did he let it happen for in the first place then? It just doesn't, none of that makes sense. I mean, you can't believe in an omniscient, benevolent God and then live in this world. But I can't answer those questions either. Like I don't fucking know. I don't know. Yes, Mr. I don't know. I believe there's something. I believe it. I feel it, but I don't fucking know what it is. I have no idea. I know I hate 99% of Christians I meet because they're fucking phony and full of shit, and they're proselytizing and they're judgmental and just douchey, right? I mean, these are the ones who were saying, President Jesus, Jesus chose Trump. Like, I read the Bible. I grew up evangelical. Like, there is nothing about that fucking racist douchebag in the office who is remotely Christian. Like, there's not. But they believe it. Why? Well, because he's white. He's white, like the white Jesus, the white, blue-eyed, blonde-haired Jesus that hung in my kitchen for years, despite coming from the Middle East, the only white guy living in the Middle East, because they could never worship a dark-skinned person. Yeah, so like, who the fuck knows? I don't know. I know I got a God. The God I believe in is pretty personal. In the words of the Depeche Mode, my own personal Jesus.
No, yeah. I mean, the reason that I even brought it up, I mean, I was raised Catholic, but I mean, at a certain point, when I was like 9, I deviated from that. And then I was a pretty devout atheist for a long time. I was just like, nope, no way, there's God. And I'd read atheistic literature, and I really bought into that. And then what happened with me, listen, bro, I'll never be one of those motherfuckers. It's like, Joe, I found God. Let's talk about it. I'll never be that kind of guy. But what happened to me, and I don't even know if that's what that's the direction I've gone, but I lost one of my best friends back in November. I slid back into addiction, and it wasn't a monetary thing, or it wasn't legal consequences. It was, oh, hey.
All right.
Yeah.
They love
hi. So that's Holden.
Yeah,
Hi, Holden. But I felt so empty at a certain point spiritually. I mean, just like that, I had no purpose left. That I went from being atheist to what you're talking about, agnostic, where I'm like, there's definitely something. Obviously, there's something besides us. I don't know what it is. I don't think humans are smart enough to write scriptures about it and have some like divine understanding of it. What I do think is, if you're humble, if you're great, if you live in gratitude, if you're nice to your fellow human being and animal, that karmically your debt will be repaid, and you're just be overall more happy. And that's how I got out of being. I was on junkie mode just a couple months ago, and I've made a real 180, just living under those basic tenets that I just described. And I'll never be one of those guys that I'll never be one of those guys that walks around with the Bible and wants to preach shit to people, because I've always not like that.
You got a book that was orally passed down for generations, heavily edited by men, and huge chunks of, huge swaths were cut out, and there's a bunch of fucked up shit still in there about, having to marry your brother's wife, or if you die, like, it's a fucking weird book. But I don't think there's anything wrong with taking, the Psalms and some of the lessons that are nice things, the weak will inherit the earth, and blessed are the poor, and all that stuff. There's some nice things.
There's love in there, and there's positivity.
You don't use it as an excuse. The problem is, most of the people I know who cling the hardest to it tend to use it as like, their excuse to hate homosexuality or hate this or hate that, and that's just kind of like, that's, if you're going to take one message from the Bible, I'm pretty sure the overarching message is like, try not to lie, don't kick cats, sort of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, right? Exactly. Yeah, it's and it's kind of, to touch on what you were saying earlier with AA, these things, had great intentions originally, but they've been perverted, lost in translation. It's turned into some sort of de facto group therapy with de facto therapists as sponsors, and that's not what that big book's about. It's certainly, you know, and Bible literalists use it, like you said, to, you know, espouse homophobia, all sorts of weird stuff. You know, if you don't believe in a monotheistic deity, you're going to burn in the fiery pits of hell. It's like, well, you know, what's loving and compassionate about that? That sounds like
Well, it depends
an
also
authoritarian dictatorship, you know?
yeah, which meeting you hit. I mean, AA has saved so many friends' lives. I mean, I try not to disparage it. It didn't work for me, but you know, different meetings, different people, different. You know, they had the saying, right? Take what you need and then leave the rest. I think over the last few years, you know, this is just from people, you know, friends of mine and family members who go. I think they've softened their hopes. It used to be like, you can't take a pain medication, but not like you can't take an antidepressant. You can't take anything because you're still out. You know, the old timers kind of stuff. And now they've been like, let the doctors do the doctor stuff. We're here just to focus on this. And I think there's been an attitude shift. But I don't know. I mean, I just hate going to the meeting, man. I hate the whole fucking.
But
I'm an
that's the
introvert.
fellowship. That's
You
not
know?
the 12 steps,
Yeah.
though. That's the fellowship, which is what I don't
I
like,
don't
because
like people.
it's
You know,
egos run amok. When you're a drug addict, you're egocentric, narcissistic. This is me. I don't want to be around a bunch of other people. I'm an attention whore. I don't want to be fighting for the spotlight with all these other people in the meeting. And yeah, I'm some selfish dope fiend, whatever.
the coffee
But
sucks. No,
yeah, the coffee's. Speaking of which, but
I don't want to. It's the whole the people thing and doing that, and it's just.
But like you said, a very important point is whatever's keeping people alive. You know, I just lost one of the closest in my life, and I know you've had some tragedies in yours as well. Whatever's keeping somebody alive that's working for them is obviously something I support, and I don't want to talk negatively about that program. It just, like you said, it's not for me personally. And I, what the fuck do I know? I've been to prison 3 times. I've been a junkie for 2 decades. I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about, you know, but I'm trying to be a good person, and in the cliche way,
Trying
taking it one day
real
at a
hard to
time.
be shit.
What's that?
You know, Samuel L. Jackson. I'm trying real hard. We're going to be the shepherd.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's you know, we were doing that reading in LA with you and the film crew was there. That was the last time I talked to my brother. I got the phone call like, you know, we're on stage and I kept getting the phone call and they're like, you know, we're trying to do an interview, so I'm not picking up. The phone keeps ringing, so I know it's not something good. And it's my sister, and she's like, yeah, this is your last chance talking to me. And being on his, you know, this is it. Because he had, you know, the funny thing with my brother was, you know, he was a junkie, but he was an alcoholic. And so when he would quit the junk, my sister and I was like, well, yeah, he's drinking a lot, but at least he's just drinking. But it wasn't the junk that killed him. I mean, his liver, he was 43, 6'5", you know, 300 pounds. And he just got, his liver was fried from alcohol. He was drinking a pint of vodka a day, if not, you know, more. He was, you know, he was a big guy who just drank from like when he was 12. I never stopped. And the truth is like, you know, ultimately you can't save somebody who's not going to be a willing participant in their own recovery, right? That's like, that's a very, and we dragged him. We would go to rehab for us. We'd be like, Josh, you got to rehab. He'd go because he wanted to make us happy. He was a good guy and he wanted to make us happy, but he didn't want to, you know, he didn't want to stop. And if you don't want to stop, like the first key to stopping that lifestyle is you got to want it more than anything, because it's gonna be the hardest fucking thing you'll ever do. I had a counselor, I remember saying, we were in rehab, and he was like, you know how when you're dope sick and you're in the snow and you don't have shoes and the dealer's, you know, 2.5 miles away, you know, and you got to walk uphill and like, and you go score. I'm like, well, yeah, fuck, of course, you get heroin. He's like, well, that's what you got to do to get sober. And we're like, fuck that. No way. But it's the truth. It really is. You have to put in that same dedication, that same, to get off heroin, you have to put in the same, you know, indefatigable, relentless, no surrender. Just you have to be, your perseverance is paramount. That's you just cannot stop. And I think I went through 18 rehabs over the course of 2 years. Kept getting out, kept fucking out, getting out, fucking up until it finally stuck. And then went back to school. School helped me a lot. You got to find something to replace that with.
Yeah, exercise. I think we both used
Exercise, yeah.
exercise a lot. Yeah.
Exercise, school, those two things. And then, when I went back to college, they were like, no, man. I was ashamed to go back to college. I was 34. I had no license. I was riding a bicycle, not like to ride a bicycle like people now, because like I didn't have a car. I'd worn still off my wrist. And I was ashamed. But I remember the professors, the Hazukas and Ostrowskis and Capellas, be like, no, man, you have something to write about. Like, this is great. You have real world experience. And it turned out that I could write. I didn't know I could write. I knew I was an artist and I could, paint pictures and some of the background maybe, and I could play music, but I didn't know, writing. And having somebody tell you you're good at something after all those years of being that's the first thing. That's what it gets. That's how it really gets you. Is it wipes away your self-worth to the point of, you're walking down the street and your head's hung low and you're dragging your feet. You can't look people in the eye. You're ashamed. And you don't have anything to feel good about. And academia gave me something to feel good about. I won some awards. I got on the dean's list, honor society. And started getting stuff published, and then the grad school and the books and agents and all that, and it really built up a self-esteem that had been pretty depleted because I acted like a jackass for 10 years. It's just, and in the end, that's all on me. I mean, no matter how it started, no matter how I stayed there so long, or stories of my father throwing my mother down a flight of stairs and breaking her leg. They're sad stories and stuff, but that's not what put the fucking needle in my hand. I did that. It was me who did it, and it was me who was going to have to stop doing it. And it took a long time. But, one thing's for sure is it's better on this side,
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I always say, right, your best day using isn't as good as your worst day sober. I'm like, that's got to be the dumbest fucking thing I've ever heard.
It's absolutely not true.
But then I finally got what they meant by it, right? Like, it's not quite like that. What it is simply is that, now, if my lights go out, I fucking fix it, right? Before your lights would go out, you're like, that's it, we're done.
Oh, I think what they mean with that is, because you think back, you're like, what, the worst day of using? I used to take ecstasy and have threesomes with girl. What the fuck? What are you talking about?
Those are good days.
And what I think they're talking about is when you're using, you're so morally bankrupt, you're empty. Your worst day sober, you don't have that. I don't know, moral decay. You're your best version of yourself whenever you have an extended period of sobriety, I think. Because
you can take what life's coming at you. I mean, like we're going through now, like I can't imagine like being out there going through this now. Like, I don't know what I would be doing. I mean, I imagine probably every pipeline's fucking dried up. You can't get shit, so everyone's fucking sick.
now? Right now?
I imagine.
Yeah.
Junkies right now, it's gonna be fucking hell. Yeah.
Being a heroin addict during the Corona pandemic, I can't even fucking imagine.
No, I can't. Coming in. Because I remember when stuff would dry up and be like, oh, geez, it's so fucking bad. And now, I look out, I can see the Golden Gate Bridge, I can see the Bay Bridge, I can see the Richmond Bridge, I can see all the bridges. I'm like 1,000 feet up. I'm on top of the world, literally on top of the world. Not literally on top of the world, because that would be like Everest, but figuratively speaking, I'm very high up on this hill. And it's a wonderful life. And sometimes I'll walk out there and I'll walk the dog. And I'm not the most optimistic person, as you know. I'm still deeply grounded in cynicism and pessimism. I'm kind of a miserable person. And that's just who I am. That's not going to change no matter what happens. But, you do look out and you go like, holy shit. Like, man, this isn't that bad a life. Like, this is, I got these, things, these people who care about me. And I've come back from the edge of whatever that was. And I get a chance to make my living as a writer. That's what I do full time. That's my job. I write every day. And not many people can say that. And that is a blessing. And that's something to be grateful for. And it's something I got to remind myself, because I can slip back into negativity pretty fast. Doesn't take much.
That gratitude and just being conscious about making a conscious effort just to be kind to other people for no fucking reason, gratuitous generosity, That's what's helped me the most in periods that I've been sober. And it sounds like you're saying the same stuff. I mean, it says sometimes I'm like, damn, I wish I had this, or I wish my life looked like this, or whatever. There's definitely I have higher hopes than what I've achieved at this point. But then I have to think about what I have, where I was just a year ago, is in a fucking cell. And now I get to give my little boy Eskimo kisses I get to wake up with him. And yeah, I wouldn't trade what I have now for anything. So
Yeah,
it puts things into perspective.
yeah, it does, and it's a good place to be. You
It,
having
it
fun with
is
yourself.
absolutely, Joe. And I know that you got to be somewhere. You had told me before the interview. Let's talk about where people can find you. You wrote Junkie Love. Where's that? What are your other books?
If you go to
Just rifle it off.
joeclifford.com, yeah, joeclifford.com, and I don't want to say that I'm the saddest, lonely guy that sits around Googling his own name at night. But if I were that sad and lonely, I can tell you I'm the number one Joe Clifford on Google. So you just put my name in, you can find me. Joeclifford.com. Then I got, I've got a bunch of books. I have a series, equally depressing. And I mean, I don't write the happiest of stuff. The last thing I wrote, the Scum Train's kind of a love story, a little
Oh,
indie
yeah, I
book.
like that. I just read that book. It was a
Yeah,
great
it's
book.
still lighter, a little funnier, but I mean, it's still dark. I mean, it's still drugs and people dying. And if you like that stuff, you're like, there's a whole school, there's a whole bunch of writers from, Selby Jr. and Hunter S. and everybody knows, those guys, Kerouac, and they write about all that stuff, the elation, the joys, the highs of the broken, the fractured, the damned, and finding that little glimmer of hope that keeps you going.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I can personally vouch that I've enjoyed everything I've ever written by Mr. Clifford. Joe Clifford's his name. Look up his stuff on Amazon. Go to joeclifford.com. I'll leave links to his social media, his YouTube, and where you can purchase his books and his website. Thank you, Joe. I certainly appreciate you spending the time with me, illuminating the inner, personal monologues of the depressed writer, both of us, not just you, both of us in this apocalyptic time.
Yeah.
Certainly wish you and your family the best. Stay safe. If shit hits the fan, I got a place we can go stay in Northern California. We got guns, food. You're invited.
We might be getting there soon. Say hi to your wife. Give Nico a kiss for him.
Absolutely.
All right. Take care, man.
Same to you and yours. Bye-bye, Joe.